Post-1945 Poland, a land of fear with war, poverty, banditry, prejudice and suspicion permeating society. Minority groups, anti-communist oppositionists, Jews particularly suffered. We remember the Kielce killings of 1946. An example of how, given the right circumstances, violence can erupt and local societies disintegrate. Do join me, Jan Darasz, for How We Got Here.
Today marks the 78th anniversary of the Kielce pogrom, a sudden outbreak of violence targeting Jews living in Poland. As a result of the pogrom, at least 37 Jews were killed and 35 were wounded. Due to incomplete documentation, it is impossible to definitely determine the number of victims. The tragic events, during which Poles were the executioners of their Jewish neighbors, took place in 1946, when Poland was already liberated from Nazi occupation. A major part of the violence of the Kielce pogrom happened in a building which was home to around 200 Jews, as well as multiple offices of various Jewish institutions. Nevertheless, brutality towards the Jewish population was registered throughout the entirety of the city of Kielce, as well as in trains passing through the city that day. The immediate cause of the pogrom was a rumor claiming that Jewish residents had imprisoned an 8-year-old boy in the basement of a building for ritual murder. News of the violence quickly spread, generating strong reactions in Poland, but to a greater extent abroad. It caused a wave of Jewish emigration from Poland and other European countries to the British Mandate of Palestine. Anti-Semitic attitudes were particularly noticeable in the countries of the Soviet bloc. In 1948, Soviet communist officials implemented a widespread persecution of Jews motivated by anti-Zionist slogans. Anti-Semitic purges broke out throughout the Soviet Union. All cultural institutions, schools and magazines were forcibly closed. Show trials of Jewish individuals were among the popular, particularly brutal manifestations of the Soviet anti-Semitic attitude. Soviets justified the anti-Jewish repressions at the turn of 1940s and 1950s by allegations of Jewish espionage, which was to result from pro-Western sympathies of the Jews and their desire to move to Israel.
Our guest today is Marcin Kaczorowski from the Memory of Nations Foundation. Welcome to the programme.
Thank you for the invitation.
Could you just briefly give us an outline of what actually happened in Kielce in 1947 against the background of post-war Poland?
Post-war Poland, yes. The Poland, a country that is terribly destroyed and terribly poor and terribly decimated after German occupation, and the so-called Soviet liberation suffers from different problems when they, well, in the first place, rampant crime is present in different regions of the country. People are terribly poor. And in the context of the Jewish population trying to come back to their homes, and you have to remember that not many survived, about 300,000 people. Those who try to come back to their state, that would be already in the Soviet Union, that's impossible. And those who want to come back to their homes elsewhere frequently meet people that are the new residents of their homes, and if they are unfortunate enough to come across criminals, they can even lose their life when they demand the return of the property. That, of course, doesn't only apply to Jews. Many Poles die as well. There are thousands of people who die as a result of criminal attacks. The society is incredibly poor and devastated after the war. There is vast demoralization after the war.
The picture you paint of post-war, post-1945 Poland, because there's still a war going on in Poland, a civil war, is less well known in the West. We think that the war is over, peace reigns, the dust settles. But Poland and Eastern Europe have a picture that I always think of Europe in the 30 Years' War. As you say, rampant banditry, suspicion, prejudices, and it was very easy to ignite this mixture of feeling and emotion and hatreds in Poland. Now, why did it happen in Kielce. What happened exactly in Kielce and why?
In Kielce, it all starts from a rumor about a Polish child being abducted by a Jewish family. In reality, no one got abducted, no one got kidnapped. But when the pogrom starts,
easy to accuse.
it is too late. What is important is that, however, it's the army and the police that start, who arrived in theory to run an investigation on the case, that start the pogrom. They start shooting the Jews and they start robbing the Jewish houses. In the end, out of the 37 people murdered and many wounded, there were 11 people were shot. The anti-Semitic
so 11 people
bandits,
from the authority, yes.
The anti-Semitic bandits join in and also start killing Jews. Some people are thrown out of the windows, the others are stabbed to death, and so on. But it's very important to notice that it's the authorities that start the pogrom with the strangely idle and, in theory, almighty secret police, Urząd Bezpieczeństwa, the communistic police.
Security services.
Services that really are not reacting to what is happening. And not only just that, the pogrom continues in the afternoon when the workers start coming back from the factories, and also Jews are attacked outside of Kielce. Kielce, just to shed some more light on the region, was a very important region in terms of Polish resistance during World War II. There were very strong partisan units fighting against Germans, also from different political fractions, not only the AK, but also nationalistic units. That's also very important, national armed forces, so far right that considered Soviets the enemies number one in 1944, and Germans the enemies number two. So, taking all that into account, we see that the whole tragic case of, as we put it before the program, weaponized anti-Semitism was a tool in the hands of communists. First of all, a campaign of hatred starts against the Polish patriotic underground. The communists argued that they are the Jew murderers. Reality was far from that. Of course, there were Jews that were killed in fights with the Polish underground, but the reason was not that they were of Jewish origin. There's simply many Jews were in the members of the communistic police and also of the secret police, the Urząd Bezpieczeństwa. So they fell victim in the battles against the underground, against the second conspiracy. Secondly, there's a campaign of hatred against the church. So we can see, well, using the Roman rule, cui bono, that the communists benefit from that. And also in the big picture, I think this, and this very interesting, it's also mentioned in a very interesting article by Bożena Szajno from the Polin Museum. There were unofficial deals between the communists and the Zionists in the 1940s, which allow the mass emigration of Jews from Poland to Western countries, and also to Israel. And this is the time when Israel is being formed. So it looks as if someone really wanted to drive Jews out of Poland in the 1950s, someone very close to the top of the communistic authorities. And of course that puts many people, many Jews in the panic mode. I mean, this is the end of the war and we are still being killed. We have to flee. We have to abandon
Was this
country.
a successful policy to terrorize the Jews out of Poland?
About 100,000 people leave the country. So, that's still the time when Soviet Union supports the state of Israel. The situation changed in 1950s. So definitely, who loses? The Jewish community in Poland loses, terrorized. The image of Poland loses. So the brave people of Kielce, who created great underground movement during World War II, will be associated for decades just with the pogrom in Kielce, because in the West, when you say Kielce, you just see the 37 dead Jews, and and some Zionistic and communistic fractions benefit from that. It's of course that would need definitely more research, and for many years there were different hypotheses.
What were the main narratives in the post-war history of
the post-war history? The first one was that the anti-Semitic brutes ganged up, and upon a rumor they heard, they simply started slaughtering Jews.
And the missing boy was found.
The missing boy was found. Nothing happened to him, and the rumor was that Jews wanted to kill him during a ritual murder.
Yes.
Yes. And that later some people were held responsible, but first and foremost, the people from the authorities were not the satisfactory level that we would demand today. Yes, so people should get to be imprisoned to life or sentenced to death for what they committed. But that wasn't really the case, and that narrative was actually dominant till 2006. In 2008, the Institute of National Remembrance started searching for the provocation aspect within the communistic authorities. I think this is something we really have to take into account for two reasons. It's impossible to even imagine that a situation like this could take place without the knowledge of Urząd Bezpieczeństwa, of the secret police, and that they could stand idly if that was not what they intended. And secondly, all the victims killed by the police and killed by the army, and they are the ones who start the pogrom, and others join in. That resembles what happened during the war as well. We have examples of pogrom in Wąsocz. It's exactly the same kind of political debate about the Polish guild. Jews were massacred in the town of Wąsocz, and many historians say this is a perfect example of Polish anti-Semitism during the war, Jedwabne. While really, if we dig deeper, we see that, well, Germans had a practice, very similar ones like the Soviets in Soviet Union, of using criminals, psychopaths with long sentences, murderers, and then using them or inviting them to participate in the SS-orchestrated pogroms.
Okay, look, if we broaden it out now geographically, Kielce, a single episode. Was this a single episode, an isolated incident in Poland, post-war Poland and Eastern Europe? How do you see the broader picture? Did it repeat itself, this policy?
I'm not a specialist on the other countries in Eastern Europe, so I wouldn't like to get into that, I think. In terms of Poland, we have to take a look in the first place about incidents of Jews returning to their homes, and those who are being killed when they demand the return of their property. Altogether, we estimate the victims, the Jewish victims, in the years following the end of the war will be up to 1,000 people who lost their lives for different reasons. Some of them were killed because they were Jews, others were killed because they were robbed, others because they returned to their homes and they couldn't. Personal vendettas, quarrels, also participation in the communistic police and other institutions that were seen as Poles as oppressive, and they were. So the other countries, we have to take a look at the roots of the evil. Poles and Jews lived together for over 800 years. This whole structure, this whole, too many Jews paradise collapses with the German invasion and the Soviet invasion. That really divides Poles and Jews. Of course, Nazi racial categories divide Poles and Jews along the lines that actually frequently didn't exist. Nazis say that every quarter Jewish person is actually Jewish, so there are many Polish Catholics who already converted to Catholicism that discover they are in practice Jews, and they have to go to the ghetto and they end up in the death camps. On the other hand, in 1939, many members, especially poor Jews, the ones that didn't even speak Polish, lived in Sztet, and were considered the Russifying element in Poland. They support the Soviet invaders. That, of course, brings the reaction amongst Poles. There is rise in anti-Semitism. The Jews are perceived frequently as the ones who betrayed the Second Republic.
What's the what's the history, the historiography of Kielce and the state of Polish society after the Second World War, post-1945? How is that treated in Poland and in Israel today? Is there a lively debate, or are these narratives that you mentioned at the start of our discussion set?
I think the recent research in Israel, I'm not saying that there's a debate in Israel about it. There are certain signals that come from Israel that should particularly worry Poles, because I think that the Kielce is a part of the narrative about anti-Semitic Poland, and that especially applies to World War II. There's extensive research now showing that Israelis blame Poles similarly to Germans for the Holocaust.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Kielce, if you look at this from that perspective, it's clear that, well, Jews were being killed during the war, and it continued until late after the war, and until then there's 1968, and so on and so forth. While this story should never be looked at in black and white colors or the 0-1 terms.
Yes, it doesn't necessarily, well, it teaches us as much about human nature than just about Poles and Jews, the situation there. But thank you very much for coming on to our programme. Great to have you.
My pleasure.
So, that's all we have time for today. Please join us next time for How We Got Here.